Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben White. I'm Chief Economic Correspondent at Politico and author of the Morning Money newsletter, which hopefully some of you read and most of you read. Very much appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for joining us for this Politico Live event, Beyond Survival Small Business Post-COVID-19. About 1 in 6 small businesses have closed their doors since the pandemic began in the U.S. Small businesses that have remained open are getting by with fewer employees after having to lay off workers or freeze hiring. Black and Hispanic-owned small businesses were particularly hit hardest by the economic fallout from the pandemic. Many small businesses owned by Asian Americans have also suffered documented incidents of harassment and attacks since the pandemic began. In a few moments, I'm going to kick off our event with a one-on-one conversation with Jared Bernstein. He's Senior White House Economic Advisor, longtime friend of Morning Money, and we're very pleased that he was able to join us, talk a little bit about what's ahead for small business in 2021 as they try to weather the ongoing economic uncertainty and all the other challenges that they are facing. This will be followed by a panel conversation with members of Congress, Pete Stauber and Joy Speedy, who's also chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and Alice Rodriguez, chair of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We're honored that all of them could join us. Before we get started, we'd like to thank eBay very much for sponsoring this event, and to say a few words, please welcome Jamie Iannone, President and CEO of eBay.
Thank you, Politico, for hosting this timely discussion. It's great to be with all of you today. For more than 25 years, eBay has existed to empower people and create economic opportunity for all. And that purpose has never been more apparent or important than it has over this past year, as we've realized the heightened role we must continue to play to support small businesses now and in the future. I joined eBay just over a year ago, when the world was still coming to terms with COVID-19 and its impact on our global economy. As eBay's new CEO, I understood there would be challenges ahead for small businesses. Now, looking back at my first year, I'm proud of how our community rallied together and how we built and launched new programs and tools to provide instrumental support to our sellers, helping many entrepreneurs, Main Street shops, and small businesses weather the storm of this crisis. As buyers sheltered in place, their needs for online e-commerce increased exponentially. We help sellers adapt to the shifting e-commerce environment by bringing them online smoothly and seamlessly. From helping brick-and-mortar shop owners quickly get their inventory online, to enabling people to earn additional income streams when they lost jobs or needed to stay home to take care of family. We did what we've always done. We created pathways to connect people. With over 187 million active buyers and more than 20 million sellers around the world, our marketplace draws together a network of small businesses from every corner of our country and opens up the world to them through e-commerce. As a result, most small businesses on eBay not only survived, but they thrived last year. In a recent small business seller survey, we found that over half of the U.S. sellers saw an increase in sales in 2020, and 84% of sellers said that eBay was essential to their business during COVID. We invested over $100 million to support the growing needs of small businesses through programs like Up and Running, providing the access, training, and resources to start selling online. We also know underserved communities need investment to help capitalize on these opportunities. That is why we announced a $25 million investment in the Clear Vision Impact Fund, which will help bolster minority-owned small businesses by enhancing employment, job training, and the accessibility of educational opportunities in historically underserved communities. I've heard so many inspiring stories from our sellers about how eBay has helped them succeed during the pandemic. One that comes to mind is Alec Featherstone. Alec sells comics and collectibles, but was forced to shut down his physical store in Denton, Texas during COVID as shoppers stayed home. Alec was able to transfer all of his inventory onto our marketplace, not just keeping his business running, but experiencing so much growth in sales that he plans to buy a new brick-and-mortar shop after the pandemic to supplement his eBay store. Another example is entrepreneur Angie Nelson of Livermore, California, who runs eWaste Direct with her husband, a business that diverts electronic waste from landfills by recycling and selling refurbished products online. Sustaining both the planet and livelihood with her eBay store, Angie has been able to employ 14 individuals throughout COVID without laying anyone off. With small businesses like these in mind, this Small Business Month, It's important to look back at the challenges and successes of the past year and ask, where do we go from here? And how can policymakers support small businesses to ensure that they can continue to meet growing demand for e-commerce? We applaud the critical federal and state small business programs and the relief provided to small businesses during the pandemic. We also applaud actions to expand broadband access, invest in infrastructure, and ensure that U.S. postal services are affordable, reliable, and universal. All of these efforts will continue to help small businesses reach their customers and stay competitive in the e-commerce landscape. But more needs to be done. Increasing operating costs, ongoing shipping challenges, and other complexities disproportionately affect small businesses, particularly micro businesses. In this environment, we need to reduce burdensome regulations that have negative consequences on sellers' bottom lines. Proposals and legislations that make it harder to sell at online marketplaces will stifle the economic opportunity that platforms like ours offer entrepreneurs all across the country. We've seen great resiliency in the face of this pandemic, and we are committed to continuing to enable sellers of all sizes to succeed, grow, and most importantly, connect on our platform. We are working hard to strengthen our partnership with sellers as we continue on our journey of economic opportunity for all. Because on eBay, we believe success should be available to all. Thank you again for having me and for holding this important event. I look forward to hearing from our panelists today as they discuss how to help small and micro businesses recover and succeed in a post-COVID environment.
All right. Thank you so much again to eBay for sponsoring this conversation. And we don't have a ton of time with Jared Bernstein from the White House, so let's jump right into that, kick off our first conversation with White House Senior Economic Advisor Jared Bernstein. He's on the CEA, the Council of Economic Advisors. Thank you, Jared, so much for joining us to discuss small businesses in the wake of COVID-19. As it says, post-COVID-19. I don't think we're really post-COVID-19 yet, but we're getting there, God willing. Most of us are getting vaccinated. Hopefully everybody will get vaccinated. For the audience, you can follow the conversation on Twitter using the hashtags PoliticoBusiness and tweet your questions at PoliticoLive. All right, Jared. So the economy is growing pretty rapidly right now. We've got a jobs report coming Friday that could show a gain of 1 million jobs. Why do we need to spend $4 trillion more in ways that could spark inflation? And what specifically in the White House plan would focus on small businesses that have suffered so much during COVID-19?
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Ben. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I kind of keep in touch with you every morning through Morning Money, so thanks for that very efficient morning read as well. Let me back into that question in a couple of ways. First, I just want to start by reflecting on what myself and the team are up to here. You know, there's an old saying that's supposed to be some kind of an Asian curse that says, "May you live in interesting times." Well, I looked it up, and the actual saying translates into, "Better to be a dog in times of tranquility than a human in times of chaos." I suppose this really all comes down to what do we mean by interesting and chaos, and perhaps whether you're a dog person or a cat person. And I'm not going to try to resolve all those tough questions. I'll leave that to you and your staff.
We're not going to get there.
Yeah, but I will say that it's been a true privilege to be part of President Biden's team through these challenging times. And it's a period that has, of course, seen devastating tragedy in the face of this most serious pandemic in a century, but also, of course, evidence of true heroism from Americans from all walks of life. From a policy perspective, which is what you and I like to talk about, it's been a period wherein we've really seen the importance of competent governance in the face of a crisis. And in the context of today's conversation, I know that the president has been especially mindful of the contributions of essential workers in the struggle of small businesses, especially those he refers to as moms and pops. Let me start by taking you back to the campaign when I recall being on the phone with candidate Biden when the PPP was announced. Mm-hmm. And he immediately went to, what about the unbanked and the underbanked? What about what he calls the moms and pops?
Sure.
And what can we do to make sure that our programs are helping them? And here, I think that he has really delivered on that imperative. In February, very much in the spirit of the president's values on which small business needed the most help, we opened a 2-week window wherein only the smallest businesses, those with under 20 employees, could apply to the Paycheck Protection Program, to the PPP. And that led to over 10 million loans, which the vast majority are under 50,000, supporting the smallest businesses. The rescue plan included an additional $7+ billion in PPP funding, 15 billion for the targeted EIDL payments, which are emergency grants, not loan grants, averaging over 8,000 per business. Additional funds for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grants Program, which was a program for the sudden shutdown in much of the entertainment industry. 29 billion for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And then we get to the that's the rescue plan. Now, we haven't even started talking about the jobs plan.
Yeah, which is what I want to ask you about, the jobs plan and the families plan and the price tag of $4 trillion.
Well, let me say, I'll get to that because I think that's,
let's get to it soon.
Okay, I'll get to that next. I did want to just tick through some of the things that are in the jobs links. I think that this has been underappreciated. We have more than 110 billion in financing and technical assistance for programs that would benefit small businesses, targeting especially small manufacturers. In the interest of time, I can tick through some of the important parts of that.
Very quickly, yeah, please.
Well, no, I'll save that because I want to get to.
Yeah. I just want to get to this one fundamental question. I mean, obviously, there's lots of stuff in here that you want to do for small business, and we could get into the weeds on PPP and the problems with it, and how you're fixing some of those problems and getting the funding where it needs to go. But I do want to talk just quickly about the headline figure, trillion, for these two things together, plus what we've already spent on COVID stimulus, which is a lot. And there are inflationary pressures in the economy. You can probably say that they're transitory. The Fed thinks they're probably transitory, but it's a little hard to figure out exactly why we need to spend another $4 trillion at a time when we're going to get 1 million new jobs. We have the economy growing at 6%. Like, why? What's the justification?
Yeah. So let me answer that question, because to me, and I think to the president, that question really sounds like a non sequitur in the following sense. Yes, we had a strong quarter. 6.4% annualized GDP growth, the advanced report for one quarter. And in no way does that obviate the need for 8 to 10 year investments in public goods within this economy, in infrastructure, in manufacturing, in standing up a care sector to deal with long-term structural deficits that have been plaguing particularly less advantaged people and communities in this economy for far too long. So think of it this way. Ask yourself, why does one quarter of relatively strong GDP growth somehow obviate the need to take lead out of the pipes, wherein over 400,000 kids in child care centers and public schools are exposed to that harmful lead in water? How does one quarter of GDP growth obviate the need to reach 30 million people in rural and urban areas who don't have but desperately need access to high-speed broadband? How does that obviate the need to stand up a viable, affordable, accessible care center for child and elder care providers, particularly women, who can thereby find a way into the workforce? How does one quarter of GDP growth deal with the existential challenge of clean energy? I think when you're doing this addition thing of like 2 + 2 + 2 = 6 trillion, I get it. It's a very incomplete and really non sequitur way to look at what we're trying to do here. The rescue plan was intended to get us to the other side of the crisis through virus control, vaccine distribution, and keeping families and especially small businesses intact. Then it's a matter of building back better, a far longer term plan to deal with the structural inequities that this president was elected to help solve.
Yeah, I'll leave this topic in a second, but I want to talk about, how you get from here to there, how you get this stuff through. You've got the jobs plan and the families plan, and obviously want to get both through Congress this year. Almost no chance that you'll get Republican support for a lot of the tax hikes that would support this stuff. And hopefully, given time, we'll get into some of those tax hikes and whether they might impact small businesses and hurt them potentially. I assume we're talking about reconciliation here and no possibility of a bipartisan deal with Republicans.
Well, first of all, let me just say, because you mentioned taxes and small businesses, I have to underscore a point that myself and the president and the team continually underscores, but we can't say it enough. None of the proposed tax increases hit anyone under $400,000, and the capital gains increase hits no one under 1 million, which means it only hits 0.3% of the population. So I just want to be very clear.
And you don't think those cap gains rates increases are going to reduce investment in the economy?
I don't. I mean, I think the history of changes in capital gains underscore the view that we're in a safe range as far as that's concerned. In terms of the politics, it's I gotta say that when I start talking politics with President Biden, he looks at his cell phone.
Dismisses you?
Well, it's not really my thing. So I can't. What I can say, and what the president has said, and this does really resonate with me, is that there is really a split between how people of all political stripes, once you get outside the Beltway, tell you they feel about both the rescue plan, the relief that was provided therein, the checks, the unemployment insurance, and the American Jobs, the American Families Plan in terms of investments in people's lives. 4 years added of free education. So 2 years of pre-K, 2 years of community college. If you talk to someone who's just thinking about these things in nonpartisan ways, and you say, is it really the case in today's America that 12 years of education, of publicly provided education, is sufficient? Almost everybody will say, of course not. In today's complex global economy, if we're going to compete with China, we have to make these investments. And if you look at how these investments poll among Democrats and Republicans, you will get a very different story about the partisanship that's engendered.
Well, that's an interesting question, and we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but let's just hit it for a second, which is, that a lot of these policies are broadly popular in the polls. A lot of the tax increases, both on corporations and the wealthy, are popular. They're not with Senate Republicans, and even a couple of moderate Democrats in the Senate, a harder sell. I wonder why you think that disconnect exists.
I just don't think that well, first of all, the disconnect, I think, is very much a function of a partisan politics that, is not really my job to deal with, because I'm not, the legislative person here. What I'm focusing on is the policies that will address racial inequity, that will provide good jobs for middle and low income people. We started talking about GDP. We could also talk about the stock market. I can tell you that from the perspective of President Biden, if he presides over an economy with strong GDP growth, a rising stock market, where quality jobs, access to higher education, and childcare do not reach the middle class and people of low income, he will consider that not to be the success that he is seeking and that he has instructed his team to build a path towards.
Right.
So
I think he doesn't define himself on what the stock market does day to day, and doesn't sit there watching CNBC all day and tracking the stock market.
This is, yes, I mean, it's a quip, but it's also, and you're right, but it's also, I think, quite profound. That is, you have to be mindful of this K-shaped dynamic that has persisted in our economy for so long. And if you're only looking at overall growth, and if you're looking at a stock market wherein, by the way, the bottom half owns virtually no shares of stock at all, you're absolutely going to miss this president's agenda.
Right. And obviously a lot of the Build Back Better agenda is in these two pieces of legislation. We don't have a ton of time left with you. I want to do sort of a round of quick questions on this. Would you accept a smaller infrastructure deal with Republicans that, they've talked about something less than $1 trillion or around $1 trillion? Is it worth doing that in a bipartisan way, like the president talked about when he was a candidate, or just jam it through with 51 as big as you can go? Would you do a smaller deal?
Well, I don't think we negotiate in, obviously, venues like this, but the president has said...
No, you should negotiate in venues like this.
Oh, okay, thank you. Then let me negotiate right here. Just kidding. The president has been clear that this is what's unacceptable. Inaction, unacceptable. I think failing to invest in the educational opportunities of 3- and 4-year-olds, as well as community college, making a definition of infrastructure that leaves out taking lead out of the pipes, that leaves out getting broadband to where it needs to go.
Wouldn't be acceptable. So, I mean, this is a long way of saying no to a smaller deal.
Well, no, I mean, I think the way to say it is that anyone who wants to come to the table to talk about these goals is more than welcome. They just, they're going to need to bring something real when they sit down with him, because he's playing in a very real ball game here.
Yeah, got it. Let's do two quick things. The first, I mean, this is a small business focused event, and I do want to focus on minority-owned businesses, Black, Hispanic, women-owned businesses that really have suffered badly during COVID. Quickly, how are you going to reverse that? And then I want to ask you about why we shouldn't be worried about inflation. But let's focus just for the minute or so we have left on those minority-owned businesses and how they're going to benefit from what Biden is proposing.
Yeah, so here's the answer to that, and it is actually a pervasive one throughout all of our racial equity policy, and it goes like this. Racial equity policy is not a bank shot. You don't try to do a massive PPP thing without targeting the smallest business and minority-owned businesses. If you try to do that in a kind of a bank shot, we'll hit everybody and we'll hope that we reach you as well. You're not going to get there, and that's why the policies in both the rescue plan and the jobs plan have specific carve out for small businesses. I think the February program that I mentioned earlier was quite effective in that regard, but it's also the case that many of the pieces of the jobs plan, which we really haven't gotten into the details yet, and that's okay, people can look at the fact sheet, are targeting creating national networks of incubators and innovation hubs, federal programs that are going to empower firms to participate in federal research and in areas where they've never been able to access before. And there's a minority business development agency, a new grant program created through the jobs plan that directly helps brown and black owned manufacturers access private capital. So you've got to target that stuff directly.
Let's talk inflation really quickly. We've run out of time with you, but I need to ask you about that. Everybody says transitory, that it's not inflationary to spend this much money and have this much easy monetary policy, and that anything we see is going to be short term, and then supply will catch up with demand. Explain to me why I should not be worried about inflation.
Well, I guess I'm not sure I can do that because, I worry about everything every day and I'm paid to do so. So, there's like I say, I sleep like a baby. I wake up screaming every 2 hours.
Right.
So I think the thing the transitory point is, of course, one you've made, I've made, most importantly, Jay Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, has made. And I think what we may be kind of missing here is that the key factor is, in many ways, there are two key factors. One is the depth and the length of the misalignments between supply and demand. There's an elasticity there where strong demand pulls in new supply. The timing of that is critical here, and we have to watch it very carefully. And then the bottom line is expectations. And the thing I track most closely regarding this transitory question is the extent to which inflationary expectations remain anchored. Now, you may have heard Jay Powell say the other day that he's happy to see expectations firm up a bit, and that's because we've had an opposite problem. The Fed has missed its inflation
firm up a bit, and I mean, is another way of saying rise somewhat significantly.
Yeah, so I think that there are a set of analytic markers here that we have to watch carefully. Thus far, the consensus is transitory, and that these misalignments between supply and demand, which are real, and which I trust me, the economic team is paying very close attention to, those are time limited. And this is what happens when you essentially go from a sudden stop shutting down an economy to gradually turning back on. I mean, we don't have a lot of historical examples of this, but that's what we're into here. Yeah,
we're going to let you go, Jared, but I'm going to ask you very quickly, yes or no question, and you can maybe give 10 seconds on it. Should President Biden renominate Jay Powell for a second term?
Yeah, that's going to be a process that will be run.
Yes or no, Jared?
I'm not going to get into that. Neither yes nor no at this point. It's a fair question.
Okay, yeah, but what would be the reason for not renominating him?
It's a process that hasn't, that we have to go through before we even start talking about it.
All right, Jared, I'm going to let you go. I know you have a busy day at the White House. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and helping us kick off this conversation on small business post-COVID-19. Jared Bernstein, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Great to be with you. All right, we're going to continue the conversation, and we are going to welcome an excellent panel. Joining us now, Pete Stauber is a Republican from Minnesota and member of the House Committee on Small Business and also the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty is a Democrat from Ohio. She is chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, and we're honored to have her with us. And Alice Rodriguez is chair of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Thanks to each of you for joining us this morning. We're so glad to have you, and let's jump right in. Congressman Stauber, I wanted to start with you, since we just heard from Jared Bernstein on the White House's plans to spend another $4 trillion on this economy, the jobs plan and the families plan on top of the stimulus that they already did. My guess is you don't believe this is necessary and this is too much money. Why should we not spend this kind of money?
Well, I think what we have to look at, first off, small businesses are the engine of our economy, and they've been hurt the most. And what we want to do is bring these small businesses out of this, out of COVID-19 so they can succeed. And that was part of the PPP. That was part of the second round. And just listen to your prior guest. Obviously, I disagreed with him quite a bit. He wouldn't answer the inflation question. Inflation is going to happen. We have to be very careful of that. We have to have investments that are targeted, specific, and COVID-related when we're in the arena of getting through this. And Mr. Bernstein talked about what was infrastructure. I think that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are putting everything into the infrastructure package and not going through committee and rulemaking. So I think we have an opportunity to actually get back to a regular order and work on investments. Currently, 94% of the rescue package reference to transportation infrastructure package has 94% doesn't go to roads and bridges. Those are traditional infrastructure packages. And you asked a very good question. Like, would you be willing to go, $1 trillion or just below on traditional infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, ports, locks and dams? And we can do that. I think have a healthy discussion, but it's got to be. We have to have bipartisanship. We have to understand that we have to be very careful with our spending at this point because it's our kids and grandkids. And if you think that you're going to just focus on the death taxes and taxing large employers more to a higher percent, it's not going to work. Right. Look at what happened under the last administration. Optimism was at an all-time high. Unemployment historic low. Our economy was going very well. So we have to get back to the basics and understand that small businesses are the engine of our economy.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you on how small business is doing in Minnesota and talk a little bit more about what's needed to help them. But Congresswoman Beatty, Black-owned small businesses obviously have taken a huge hit during the COVID-19 crisis. So many shut down and haven't reopened. Talk to me a little bit about what is in the Biden plan that you like, that you think will help this and perhaps reverse the trend that we really don't like to see?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you. And I think facts are important. And I also do agree that small businesses are the economic engines. I worked as a small business for decades. But let me just say, when you look at minority-owned businesses, whether it's Black Americans or Brown Americans, many of those businesses started behind the 8 ball before we got started.
Sure.
And when facts are being quoted, they're being quoted by majority folks or my colleagues on the other side. They leave out a lot of facts. When you talk about the last administration and unemployment, it was double for Black Americans. Mm-hmm. But if you're only focusing on majority or white Americans and not Black and brown, you get different information. And let me correct something that's been fact checked. No matter how tricky you say it, whether you say 94% or you say only 6%, we need to get that straight. It's wrong. It's misleading. As a matter of fact, it's more like 28, a little less than 30%. There's a significant difference. And also, I think we have to look at how we define businesses and what happens. We can talk about the billions of dollars we put in for PPP, and I supported that. However, when you look at minority-owned businesses, we know they were not in that first round and barely in the
Yeah.
second round of being able to put those dollars into those businesses. So for Black Americans, when you look at the disparities, the systemic racism that we have been facing, more dollars needed to be put in. And thank goodness for Democrats, thank goodness for the Small Business Committee with Nydia Velasquez. Thank goodness for the Financial Services Committee, by the way, the committee I serve on, and first ever chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee. We weighed in heavily in the Small Business Committee to make sure that those dollars were invested back in minorities.
And do you think that's happening now? Like, I mean, are we getting the dollars where they need to go? I mean, as you hear from constituents and as you talk to the community, like, there was that period of time where it really wasn't happening. As you said, we had the underbanked problem, and I know the administration is trying to deal with that. But do you feel like we're at a point where, the loans and the support is getting where it needs to go in the African American community?
I think thanks to the Biden administration coming in, cleaning up a lot, and trying to move us forward to build back better, we are getting there. It's still not perfect. It's going to take all of us. I represent majority Americans and Black Americans. I don't have a predominantly minority district, but I'm out there fighting for everything. You have rural businesses that are majority folks that run. You have Hispanic and Asian American businesses that suffered. We cannot be tunnel vision and only look at the majority and quote facts that are only related to them or what the Republican rhetoric is.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I want to come back to you in a minute on how you get this done and whether it's a bipartisan thing or just through reconciliation and Democrats bringing in. But Alice, I want to bring you in very quickly and talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on Hispanic-owned small businesses. I know it's been quite large, and how you expect them to fare in 2021. Give us a sense for what's happened and what you're hoping for and what we should expect to see as this year unfolds.
Hey, thanks, Ben. I really appreciate the opportunity here. And as you said, Latino-owned businesses have been disproportionately impacted as a result of COVID-19. And a lot of that has to do with where we over-index. So I do think that the devil is always in the details. In other words, we have to double-click and understand the programs that are in place. How are they actually going to get to the people that need them? So Hispanic-owned businesses tend to over-index in 5 specific sectors. One is construction, another one is retail, another one is transportation, personal services. And when you look at all of these sectors, these were the ones that were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And so as we think about recovery, and as we think about programs in place, we should be very narrow and specific to say, like, how are the new programs really going to impact these businesses? How do we, as a chamber, as you know, we're a nonpartisan organization. So what we care about ultimately is who we see as our constituent, which is the Hispanic-owned business. So they want to make sure that these programs are going to actually impact these sectors and that we have a place at the table for them. So, we estimate that as of September, we lost about 30% of Hispanic-owned businesses where, they closed for good because they just couldn't get the access to capital. So we're very focused on programs that help our Hispanic-owned businesses with access to capital. Secondly, business networks. That's another thing that really impacts a lot of the minority-owned businesses. How do we ensure that they're part of the network? And then finally, number 3, as it relates to contracts, whether that's at the federal level, the local level, or with our corporates, that we are helping these Hispanic-owned businesses scale and have a seat at the table for the opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder just how much you think the programs so far, particularly PPP, have been helpful in the Hispanic-owned business community. And then quickly on all the proposed tax hikes that the Biden administration is talking about to pay for some of their spending, I imagine that you might not be in support of all of that on capital gains and on the corporate rate. So how effective has PPP been for the Hispanic community, and how do you feel about a lot of the tax hikes that Biden is talking about to pay for some of his proposals.
Yeah, for the Hispanic-owned businesses that got access to the PPP loans, it was very helpful. We estimate about half of Hispanic-owned businesses that applied for PPP received it.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you are probably aware, there were just lots of technical challenges, and if you didn't have a relationship with either an organization or a bank to help you through it, it was a bit of a challenge. Exactly. I think as it relates to taxes, we're currently really looking at what all the implications are. And as you can well imagine, we will advocate for anything that we think is going to impact businesses in a negative way. So I don't really have a comment yet on what I think they're all, going to be beneficial or not. But I think that's the critical role that the chamber plays, is to really advocate and ensure that, again, when you do all the double clicks, that we're not in any way going to disproportionately impact, because as one of your guests already said, small businesses employ a little over half of the people in America.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't recognize that if you're, going to aim at, a certain income level, that may hit some small businesses, which, by the way, they may not have a lot of employees on their payroll, but there's a lot of 1099 employees that work for them. So you just, this trickle down effect that you have on a lot of people.
Right. And I just want to say that it's not allowed under political rules to not have a comment on something. So we'll just allow that when I come back to you the next time. But Congressman Stauber, let me come back to you on this question of the tax hikes, particularly the capital gains rate, which there's a proposal for a significant increase in that, and then the corporate rate possibly going back to somewhere around 25%. When you look at this and the size of the spending package and the taxes proposed to pay for it, what's that going to do to small business?
Well, I think first off, we are in a global competitive world, and what we want to do is we want to ensure that we're competitive by keeping the tax rates as low as we can. The Biden administration wants to bring the tax rates up in our country for large businesses and large employers that are going to make them not competitive. We want to reinvest and bring the manufacturing back to this country to employ our people, to make the goods here in this country. You cannot you cannot continuously tax small businesses and think that they're going to succeed. We have to give them the opportunity, reduce redundant and overburdened regulations. And I do want to come back and talk to the targeted relief. Alice is exactly right. Let's target the relief. I was at a local restaurant, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund that opened yesterday. She was able to.
Tell us where that is exactly. What restaurant? Where is it?
Oh, if I can say the restaurant, I'd love to. It's Valentini's Restaurant in Hermantown, Minnesota.
Very nice.
She spent 5 hours. She told me 5 hours in the process. So if we can help that business owner reduce the 5 hours on the computer so she can get back to her business, that's what the committee is trying to do, the Small Business Committee and Small Business Administration, to allow those targeted minority-owned businesses to succeed. But we have to do it in a bipartisan way. You cannot put legislation on the floor that doesn't get any minority votes.
Right.
So far,
well, you can, but.
Well, I really think that we in Congress can do better. Look at the 5 previous COVID packages. They were bipartisan, up to 90% bipartisan.
Right.
And we knew that we had to work together to move this country forward. And I think that when, as a small business owner myself for 31 years, the raising of the taxes, the unfunded mandates, they're hard on small business owners. Many of our small businesses are less than 20 people across this nation. We have to understand, and we have to understand that targeted relief towards our small businesses to keep them open and viable, and then to allow them to become even more prosperous after we get through this COVID. And I do believe we can see the light.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that quickly before I move back to Congresswoman and Alice, just quickly about Minnesota and the situation on the ground there, where you are in terms of reopening and how you feel small businesses are coming back, regardless of what's happening in Washington. And there'll be a lot of debate about more spending and taxes and all the rest of it. But just give us a quick picture for what reality is like on the ground there for you.
We have a governor that has unilaterally demanded he keep his emergency powers. They voted several times to remove him from his emergency powers. We're into our 14th month of his emergency powers. He has he has shut down the state. He has made decisions to allow only a certain a certain percentage of patrons to be in the restaurants. It's devastating when they want to open up, and we know we can do it safely. And that he's only allowing 25 and now 50%. These small business owners, and particularly the hospitality industry, especially in northern Minnesota, are resort owners. We have seasonal resort owners that need these people to come and enjoy the great northern Minnesota scenic areas that we have, and hunt and fish and bike, recreate. And so we have to, number one, have our governor remove his emergency powers, so collectively our elected officials could make those big decisions. And these small business owners, it's a workforce development right now. We have paid people more to stay home, and I've been around the district and around the state. They can't find the employees because they're getting paid as much or just under what they would to get to work.
Yeah,
and
that's an interesting thing. The question of how hard it is for small businesses to find employees now, which, I mean, partly is a good problem to have long term. Like, you want there to be pressure in the labor market.
We have to, Ben, we have to understand the dignity of work.
Yeah, sure.
And allow upward mobility, the promise of upward mobility for our workforce. And that's what we're seeing on the ground in Minnesota.
Got it. Congresswoman Beatty, I wanted to ask you about some of the congressman's comments and whether you think it's even necessary to do this in a bipartisan way, or should the White House continue to move forward as it has been, which seems to be, get as much as you can passed in the House and then get whatever you can through the Senate with 51 votes. Does bipartisanship here really matter?
So first of all, I always support us trying to work together to move it forward. We don't always get the number of our colleagues to do that. We got some bipartisanship when we looked at the CARES Act. There will always be members of Congress who will do the right thing, and when we have bipartisanship, not enough. So my thing is, if you can get a handful or a dozen, then the other folks are just voting partisan or doing what they're told by their leadership. But when you look at the original tax question that you asked, let me just put facts on the table.
Sure.
55% of the largest companies in the United States paid zero in federal taxes last year. I think they should pay their share of the taxes. And if we look at it for the individuals, there was no tax increase, as we all know, for families making less than $400,000. But large corporations must pay their fair share in order to pay for the infrastructure that helps small businesses. Corporations only pay 7% to the total tax. And that must be changed for the small businesses. We both the congressman and I have served as small businesses, and I agree with him. For those businesses with 20 or 10, and what I call the real small businesses, it was the Democrats who put into the act to carve out dollars specifically for really small. As we all know, it started out with 500 employees or less. Well, in my district, that's not small. When I think of small businesses, it's 50 or 25 or even 10. So thank goodness for those barbershops and beauty salons that called me repeatedly asking for help. We were able to do that. Now, when we talk about the tax rate, remember, it was 35% and Republicans lowered it to 21%. Biden wants to raise it to about 28%. I'm very supportive of that. He's simply leveling the economic playing field to benefit small businesses who can't afford to stash up, monies to have it. So in some ways—
Ask Ben if I can comment.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, sorry.
I haven't taken this
technical interruption there for a second. I'm gonna move back to the other panelists, but just tell us quickly about your district in Ohio and where it is, and exactly, who your folks are.
Well, my district has 29 municipalities, so I have a little bit of everything in the in the district. But I can tell you, when we look at small businesses, we talked about restaurants.
Just tell me the area, though, like what.
Oh, okay. So if you look at the 29 municipalities and you know anything about Ohio,
I went to college in Ohio, so I know a little bit.
the Ohio State University.
No, I didn't go there. I went to Kenyon.
Okay. And so when I go as far to the north as we go to the Licking County line, and I go as far to the west side, all the way to the end in Montgomery, in Franklin County. I am wholly contained, but I have the city of Bexley
Gotcha.
in there, and I have Groveport, Grove City, Reynoldsburg, Gahanna, White.
Yep, all right, I got it. A wonderful place, and I had a great time going to college in Ohio. And Congressman, definitely, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but want to go back to Alice and just talk a little bit about some of what you've heard so far from Congressman Stauber and Beatty, and kind of hopeful you are for a real renaissance in Hispanic-owned businesses this year. I mean, it feels like to me, the economy is set to heat up pretty quickly over the rest of this year as we get more people vaccinated, and demand is going to come back, and there is cash on hand. A lot of people have to spend. Just give me your sense of optimism or lack of optimism on it.
Oh, I'm optimistic for sure. And recently, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, in their optimism metrics, said optimism was up in the month of March. And the point made about finding employees was also made in that particular survey. So I'm very optimistic. I think that when you look at Latino-owned businesses, Ben, over the last 10 years, like right before the pandemic, they grew 4%, and that compared to 1% for non-Hispanic businesses, and Latino-owned businesses grew 6 times as fast. So there's a very strong entrepreneurial spirit within the Latino community, and people, come here to start businesses. There's a very strong representation of immigrants that come to start businesses here. So I feel very optimistic. I think, again, the key is going to be, how do we scale some of these businesses, Ben, to take advantage? So the Congresswoman was right in the sense that the majority of small businesses in America, and there's 30 million of them in the country, are small. They have annual sales of like less than 100,000. So they're very micro. So we've been very focused on recognizing that, when you look at Hispanic-owned businesses in this country, only about 3% of them scale over $1 million in sales. And if you think about all of these programs and infrastructure that may be available, they're going to need to be businesses that are a little bit larger. So for the minority communities, that's smaller than that from a percentage standpoint than white entrepreneurs. So we're going to have to figure out, how we scale these businesses so they can actually take advantage of the opportunities with programs, et cetera, that are coming up.
Yeah. Congressman Stauber, I feel like you were chomping at the bit here to get in. I don't know exactly what you wanted to jump in on, but any.
Yeah, Ben, thank you very much. And my colleague, the chairwoman out of Ohio, I do want to talk about the tax rate. The Biden administration wants the tax rate higher than the country of China's. Now, that's unacceptable. When you raise taxes, make no mistake about it, it affects the lower and middle class. That's who pays for it, because the corporations aren't going to eat that themselves. They're going to make us pay more for our as consumers for every product they make, including the price of electricity and gas and what we need to purchase for our families every day. We have to understand, when we raise taxes, it affects the lower and middle class, because that's the majority of us, and the majority of us pay the taxes.
Yeah, but you don't think that the Trump administration lowered the corporate rate too much? I mean, I know even Gary Cohn, when he was NSC director, was not necessarily in favor of going as low as what happened, and would have been happy at 25%. Isn't there a compromise here where you could generate a little bit more revenue in corporate America?
I think that if we look at what the Trump administration did, look at how our economy boomed. Look at our small business optimism for our small business, and I'm currently one of them. Was at an all-time high, and this COVID shut it down. So let's work to
Let,
get
let, let me do what
everybody
he did.
succeed.
Let
And
me
when
have time
everybody
to come back.
succeeds, we
I
all
will
do
let
better.
you.
Small businesses, as we know, are the engine of our economy. So what we need to do is we need to work with them. And we talked about, and the Congresswoman and I agree, targeted investment for these small businesses. But we have to allow them to succeed and allow. I don't understand why my colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't want people to keep more of the money that they earn and allow to spend it the way they want within their communities, investing in their employees, investing in capital for their small business so they can grow and compete even at a bigger level.
Tell me quickly what your small business is, because I should have done more research and just didn't have the time, so I don't know. What is it?
Thank you, Ben. My small business, my brothers and I have owned it for 31 years. It's called Duluth Hockey Company. As you know, Minnesota is the state of hockey. And it's a wonderful business, but we've struggled just like the millions and millions of other businesses across this nation.
I'd love to talk to you another time all about that, because it sounds fascinating. But Congresswoman Beatty, I promised that you would be allowed to respond there, so please jump in.
Well, first of all, it's interesting, and we do agree on the small businesses being the economic engine. But one of the things, as my colleague just ended with them having more money, but he was critical of people getting the dollars for unemployment and the additional dollars, saying they were not going back to work. Well, for minority people, that's not true, that getting that money is causing problems. I think the other thing is, when you look at his statements, they may be for those wealthy or small businesses who've done well. You have to look at the facts. Minority businesses were behind the 8 ball before the pandemic. And so when you're playing catch up, because of all the other factors that go into it, we saw that with the PPP, and that passed out in a bipartisan fashion. Banks, if you didn't have a relationship, you had all these stipulations that deals with the cultural biases that we have. We're living in a world of systemic racism. So you have to take all of that in. Trickle-down economics don't work, and it hasn't worked, and President Biden just said that in his statement. We also have to look at our communities as a whole. If you don't invest in your communities, it hurts everyone. So going back to his statement, which I agree with, for small businesses, but even in this pandemic, there are many corporations who are experiencing windfalls, and the middle class and the lower class Americans can't continue to do all the heavy lifting on the tax revenue.
Yeah, that pivots us. We only have a few minutes left, and I do want to
get
Ben, can audience questions.
I want to respond to Congresswoman
very quickly, if you could.
Okay, I just spoke to a business owner yesterday, and he was having a successful. He was in a business that was successful, and what he did is he invested in his employees. He gave each one of his employees a bonus during this time. So he and his business did very well, and he, as a large employer, invested in his employees by giving them bonuses during this difficult time. That's what responsible employers do. And I'm seeing it throughout the district there, because you can't have a successful business without great employees, and we all know that.
But you have to have the money to give it to them.
True. I want to bring Alice back in as we sort of run short of time and find a good audience question for her. So I'm going to ask one, and we thank you so much, people watching on the live stream and folks who send in questions, and love to get to more, but I'll try to hit a couple of them. One of them is, how can entrepreneurs in compacted markets that concentrates opportunity among a handful of really big, powerful companies, how can they compete? Who's going to regulate Amazon and Google? Is there a necessity for Washington to be addressing some of the gigantic companies in the U.S. that maybe are making it harder for small businesses to thrive? I wonder what you think about that from a Chamber of Commerce perspective.
Yeah, I think it's important for the Hispanic Chamber and all the chambers actually to engage, companies like Amazon in the conversation, because I do think it is a challenge. I do think that we need to make sure that things are fair and equitable across the landscape. And I do think that it is a particular challenge. So what we've started to do is engage those large corporates like Amazon, Facebook, et cetera, to ensure that we've got a fair level playing field across the board.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see if we do one more quick audience question before we let everyone go. And actually, this is for anyone, but Congressman Beatty and maybe a congressman, you might have a response to this. An audience question is the federal government doing enough to ensure that minority business are getting their fair share of these recovery funds? I think a fundamental question is, are we at that point where minority-owned businesses are actually getting access to this?
I can go first before the Congresswoman. I think we need to do more, and we need to target that investment. As being on the Small Business Committee, my second term here, it has become very evident that we have to reach those small businesses, minority owned, and we have to do a better job. And that's why I'm excited to work with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to work at this targeted investment and see and look at small businesses like the woman who owns a restaurant that I went to last night. Mm-hmm. Important that they succeed. When they succeed, the communities succeed, the employees succeed, and that's what the American dream is about.
Yeah, all right, quickly tell us what you had to eat at dinner last night, and then we'll go to Congresswoman Beatty. Just give me your order.
I had penny and pasta sausage, and it was really good.
Sounds very good. Okay, Congresswoman Beatty, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Obviously, I think we can do more, and it'd be interesting to see. I'm glad my colleague agrees with me, and I'm going to be watching that vote. I'll go back and look at how he voted on the CARES Act. There were 6 Republicans who voted with us because of what he said. I'm hoping he's one of them because it had everything he said outlined in it for small businesses, for MDIs, for community development financial institutions. So we can do more. I think that when you look to the Biden administration, their small business administration, when you look at what Chairwoman Nydia Velázquez is proposing, it'll be interesting to see if my colleague would take a leadership role in getting more of his colleagues to join him. But votes matter, words matter, actions matter. And if we come together, we can do more, we should do more.
Sure.
Many of the chambers of commerces, whether it is the Hispanic, whether it is the African American chamber, they're all saying we should be greater advocates for small and minority and women-owned businesses. Yeah. So I think when you look to our infrastructure bill and you look at some of the dollars we're in there that will help small businesses, whether that's housing, whether that's giving monies to them for land development, then that's how you increase the small businesses. You can't just do what we did 100 years ago.
Right.
When we vote on this infrastructure package, it will help small businesses. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember, when the infrastructure package first came out, it was just roads. And then someone said bridges. Now we're coming together for broadband. Housing is also infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So if we're really going to move the small businesses, we have to look at the other things that affect employees. And that is education, that is child care, that's the whole package.
Whole enchilada. Yeah, we're running out of time there. But Alice, you wanted to jump in, please.
Yeah, one last thing. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with both panelists here that we need to do more. And just to build on what the Congresswoman just said, Ben, I do think that, again, the devil is in the details. We can say all this big stuff, but look, small businesses are busy. They're running their businesses. They don't even, some of them aren't even aware, for instance, that PPP has been extended, right, until the end of May. I happened to speak to a small business owner this weekend about that. But the housing piece that the Congresswoman just pointed out, extremely important because there is a very serious affordable housing crisis in this country that I'm not sure people have talked enough about. And this would be an opportunity to put that in the forefront. And, again, thinking of the sectors that Hispanic-owned businesses over-index in, construction being one of them, that could be very meaningful.
Yeah, there's so many threads we could pull here. There's so many conversations I'd like to have with each one of you about all of your experiences in this economy. And we could go on for a lot longer, but we don't have the time. So I'm going to thank you, Congresswoman Beatty, Congressman Stauber, and Alice so much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts and insights with us. Fascinating conversation, so much more we could do and talk about, and I'd love to get into, and we'll do another time in some other format. And thanks again, of course, Jared Bernstein, White House Economic Advisor, for joining us earlier this morning. And a big thank you to everyone tuning in on the live stream. And thank you so much to eBay for sponsoring this Politico Live event. We loved having all of you and are very appreciative of your time and your support. Please follow Politico Live on social media for updates on upcoming programming. There's going to be a lot of it. We're coming back. Hopefully this economy's coming back. We're going to fight over a lot of stuff on taxes and on spending. But God willing, all of us will have a better economy to live in 2021 across the board. So we'll hope for that. Please, everyone, take care, be safe, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.